The story of the Jewish people, from ancient patriarchs to modern Israel. What connects a group of nomadic tribes wandering the deserts of the ancient Near East to a modern, technologically advanced nation-state on the Mediterranean coast? How did a people without a homeland for nearly 2,000 years maintain their identity, language, and culture across continents and centuries? This is the story of resilience, faith, and survival, the story of the Jewish people. Chapter 1. The Age of the Patriarchs. Our journey begins in the windswept deserts of Mesopotamia, around the early 2nd millennium BCE. Here, we meet Abraham, considered the founding patriarch of the Jewish people. According to the Hebrew Bible, God called Abraham to leave his homeland in Ur, promising to make his descendants into a great nation. Abraham's journey took him to Canaan, a land that would become central to Jewish history and identity. As he ventured through the vast and arid landscapes, Abraham's faith in a single, omnipotent God set him apart from the polytheistic beliefs of the surrounding civilizations. His travels were not merely a religious quest but also a reflection of the shifting alliances and power struggles between ancient empires. The land of Canaan, with its fertile valleys and strategic location, was already home to various tribes, each with its own customs and gods. Abraham's arrival in this land marked the beginning of a new chapter, not only for him but for the people who would call this region their home for centuries to come. Abraham's story is not just a religious narrative but also reflects the movements of Semitic tribes during this period. Archaeological evidence suggests that nomadic groups, much like Abraham's family, migrated across the Fertile Crescent, driven by climate changes, trade opportunities, and political upheavals. This era, often called the Early Bronze Age, was marked by the rise of city-states and the development of writing, which allowed civilizations like the Sumerians and Akkadians to flourish. But it was also a time of disruption, with invasions and the gradual collapse of older empires, leading many smaller groups to seek new lands and opportunities. Abraham's migration could have been part of a larger wave of such movements, as these early Semitic peoples searched for stability, wealth, and the promise of a new beginning. His journey would lay the foundation for a people whose story would intertwine with the history of the ancient Near East for millennia. Abraham's son Isaac and grandson Jacob continued the lineage, with Jacob receiving the name Israel after wrestling with an angel. His 12 sons became the progenitors of the 12 tribes of Israel, each tribe settling in different regions across Canaan. One of these sons, Joseph, was sold into slavery by his brothers and eventually rose to prominence in Egypt, setting the stage for one of the most dramatic episodes in Jewish history. Joseph's rise to power as a trusted advisor to the Pharaoh was not only a personal triumph but a pivotal moment in the broader narrative of the Jewish people. It was during this time of prosperity in Egypt that the Israelites, initially welcomed and respected, would later face oppression, leading to their eventual exodus from Egypt. Joseph's story, filled with betrayal, dreams, and ultimate reconciliation, highlights themes of faith, perseverance, and divine intervention that would resonate throughout Jewish history. Chapter 2. Slavery and Exodus. The Israelites, descendants of the patriarch Jacob, once thrived in Egypt, enjoying the prosperity of a welcoming land. However, as the generations passed, a new pharaoh rose to power, one who did not know Joseph. This change marked the beginning of hardship for the Israelites, who were soon enslaved, subjected to grueling labor and harsh treatment. The oppression they faced in Egypt became a defining moment in their history, forever shaping their identity. The Israelites were forced to work under harsh conditions, constructing monumental structures and serving the whims of their rulers, their lives bound by the cruelty of an oppressive regime. Amidst this turmoil, Moses, a man with an extraordinary destiny, emerged as the liberator of the Israelites. Born to a Hebrew family, Moses was raised in the royal household of Egypt after being adopted by the Pharaoh's daughter. But when he witnessed the brutal treatment of his people, Moses killed an Egyptian taskmaster who was beating an Israelite slave, forcing him to flee into the desert. It was in the wilderness that Moses encountered a burning bush, where he received a divine command to return to Egypt and demand the Pharaoh's release of the Israelites. Reluctantly, he returned to face the ruler who had once been his own. The story of the Exodus is an iconic and deeply symbolic journey of liberation. The biblical narrative tells of 10 plagues sent by God to punish the Egyptians, each more devastating than the last, culminating in the final plague that claimed the lives of Egypt's firstborn sons. After this, the Pharaoh relented, allowing the Israelites to leave. As they fled Egypt, Moses led them through the parted waters of the Red Sea, an event immortalized in Jewish tradition and art. While archaeological evidence remains elusive, the story resonates as a powerful memory of a people's struggle for freedom. The journey continued through the Sinai Desert, where the Israelites received the 10 Commandments on Mount Sinai. This moment, when the covenant between God and the Jewish people was forged, laid the foundation for Jewish law, ethics, and identity, creating a lasting bond between the Israelites and their God. Chapter 3. The Kingdoms of Israel and Judah. After 40 years of wandering in the desert, the Israelites finally arrived in the land of Canaan, a fertile and bountiful region promised to them by God. They began by forming a confederation of 12 tribes, each with its own territory and leader, but this decentralized system was often unstable, leading to internal conflicts and a lack of unity. During this time, the Israelites were guided by judges, leaders chosen for their wisdom and strength, who helped them navigate military and spiritual challenges. Yet, despite the judges' influence, the people yearned for a stronger, centralized authority. This desire for unity culminated in the anointing of Saul, a charismatic leader, as the first king of Israel. Saul's reign marked the beginning of Israel's monarchy, though it was fraught with struggles against external enemies like the Philistines. Saul's successor, David, would go down in history as one of the greatest leaders of Israel. A humble shepherd boy, David gained fame when he defeated the giant Goliath with a single stone from his sling, a story that symbolized his courage and faith. Upon Saul's death, David ascended to the throne and united the northern and southern tribes of Israel. His military campaigns expanded the borders of the kingdom, and he established Jerusalem as the political and spiritual heart of the nation. David's reign was marked by prosperity and stability, and he sought to bring the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem, making it the spiritual center of Jewish worship. His son, Solomon, inherited the throne and furthered his father's legacy. Solomon is remembered for his wisdom and for building the first temple in Jerusalem, a majestic structure that became the focal point of Jewish prayer and sacrifice. Under Solomon's rule, Israel flourished economically and politically, becoming a significant power in the ancient Near East. However, after Solomon's death, the unity of the kingdom began to crumble. His son, Rehoboam, became king, but his harsh policies towards the northern tribes led to a revolt. The kingdom split in two, with Israel in the north and Judah in the south. The division weakened both kingdoms, making them vulnerable to external threats. The northern kingdom of Israel, though initially strong, faced constant internal strife and external pressure. In the year 722 BCE, the Assyrian Empire, a powerful military force, conquered Israel, leading to the dispersion of the 10 lost tribes. These tribes were scattered across the empire, and their fate remains a mystery to this day. Judah, though smaller and weaker, managed to survive for a time. However, in 586 BCE, the Babylonian Empire, under the rule of Nebuchadnezzar II, besieged Jerusalem, destroyed the first temple, and exiled many Jews to Babylon, marking the beginning of the Babylonian exile. This dark period in Jewish history would shape the Jewish people's identity and their yearning for a return to their homeland. Chapter 4. Exile and Return. The Babylonian exile, beginning in the 6th century BCE, was a profound upheaval for the Jewish people. Stripped of their beloved temple and driven from their homeland, the Jews found themselves in a foreign land, facing the uncertainty of a life far from their roots. This exile, however, marked a time of significant transformation. It was during this period that the Jews adapted and found new ways to express their faith. They no longer had the physical presence of the temple to bring them together, so they turned to prayer, study, and community as their means of connection to God. The heart of Jewish worship shifted from rituals centered around sacrifice to a focus on the Torah, and much of what would later become the Hebrew Bible was compiled in this era. In this new environment, the synagogue emerged as the focal point for Jewish life, a place where Jews could gather to pray, learn, and preserve their identity in the face of exile. In 539 BCE, a significant turning point occurred when Cyrus the Great, the king of Persia, conquered Babylon. A remarkable act of tolerance, he allowed the Jews to return to Jerusalem and rebuild their temple. The Second Temple, constructed under his patronage, symbolized not just a physical return to the land but also a spiritual renewal. It stood as a testament to the resilience of the Jewish people, who, even in the face of foreign domination, managed to preserve their faith and culture. Despite this return, the Jews remained under the control of foreign powers. The Persians ruled for several centuries, and after them, the Greeks took control of the region, leading to new challenges for Jewish identity and religious practice. The arrival of Alexander the Great and the spread of Hellenistic culture introduced a new set of pressures. Hellenism, with its emphasis on Greek philosophy, customs, and religion, permeated the lands that the Jews had returned to, creating divisions within the Jewish community. Some Jews embraced Greek ways, seeing them as a path to progress and inclusion, while others, particularly the more traditionalist factions, saw them as a threat to their way of life. This cultural clash reached its peak in the 2nd century BCE, when tensions boiled over into the Maccabean revolt. Under the leadership of the Hasmonean family, the Jews fought for their right to worship freely and to preserve their unique identity. Their victory in this revolt led to the establishment of the Hasmonean dynasty, a short-lived but significant Jewish kingdom. It also gave rise to the festival of Hanukkah, commemorating the rededication of the Second Temple, a symbol of Jewish resilience and triumph over external forces that sought to erase their traditions. Chapter 5. Roman rule and the Second Temple's destruction. By the 1st century BCE, the mighty Roman Empire had extended its dominion over Judea, reshaping the region's political and cultural landscape. The Jewish people, long accustomed to a degree of autonomy under previous rulers, found themselves increasingly under Roman control. This period saw the rise of tensions, as messianic expectations surged among the Jewish populace, who yearned for a savior who would liberate them from Roman oppression. Among the most significant events during this turbulent time was the life and crucifixion of Jesus of Nazareth, a charismatic Jewish preacher whose teachings would eventually give birth to Christianity. His message of love, redemption, and salvation echoed across the empire, but it was his crucifixion by Roman authorities that would mark a turning point in both Jewish and world history. The growing unrest between Jews and Romans came to a head in the First Jewish-Roman War, which erupted in the year 66 CE. The war was a desperate bid by the Jewish people to reclaim their independence, but it ended in tragedy. Under the command of General Titus, the Roman legions laid siege to Jerusalem in the year 70 CE, a city that was not only a political center but also the spiritual heart of Judaism. The Romans, determined to crush the rebellion and solidify their control, destroyed the Second Temple, an act that shattered the core of Jewish religious practice. The temple, which had stood for centuries as a symbol of divine presence and the focal point of Jewish worship, was reduced to rubble. This event would have a profound impact on the Jewish people, forever altering their religious practices and sense of identity. Yet, the devastation did not end there. The destruction of the Second Temple and the loss of Jerusalem were followed by a second major revolt known as the Bar Kokhba Revolt, which took place from the years 132 to 136 CE. The revolt, led by the charismatic Simon Bar Kokhba, was a final attempt by the Jews to overthrow Roman rule. However, it too was brutally crushed by the Romans, who sought to erase the Jewish connection to the land. In an attempt to obliterate any trace of Jewish identity, the Romans renamed the region Palestina after the ancient enemies of the Jews, the Philistines. Many Jews were killed, while others were enslaved or exiled. Despite these overwhelming hardships, the spirit of the Jewish people endured. Communities scattered across the Roman Empire and beyond, holding fast to their traditions and their hope for a return to Zion, which would one day blossom into the dream of a restored homeland. Chapter 6. Diaspora and Survival. For nearly 2 millennia, the Jewish people lived in diaspora, scattered across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. Despite facing numerous challenges, their culture, religion, and identity endured. In some places, Jews thrived. In medieval Spain during the Golden Age, Jewish scholars, poets, and philosophers enjoyed unprecedented freedom, contributing to a flourishing of Jewish thought and culture. Great minds like Maimonides, who wrote extensively on Jewish law and philosophy, and poet Yehuda Halevi, whose works still resonate today, embodied the intellectual and spiritual heights of this period. Cities like Córdoba and Toledo became vibrant centers of learning, where Jews, Christians, and Muslims coexisted peacefully, exchanging ideas and knowledge. However, this golden era was not to last. The tides of history shifted, and the Jews found themselves enduring harsh and violent times. The Crusades, launched in the 11th century, brought devastation to Jewish communities in Europe. During the First Crusade, thousands of Jews were slaughtered in the Rhineland massacres, with entire communities wiped out. In the following centuries, Jews were expelled from various countries, such as England in 1290, France in 136, and Spain in 149 too, where they were given the painful choice of conversion or exile. The Spanish Inquisition, with its relentless persecution, led to the forced conversions of countless Jews, while those who remained true to their faith faced torture and execution. One of the darkest chapters in Jewish history came with the rise of modern anti-Semitism in the 19th century. In Eastern Europe, particularly in the Russian Empire, Jews suffered from brutal pogroms, which were violent riots fueled by hatred and false accusations. Meanwhile, in France, the Dreyfus Affair, an infamous case of wrongful conviction, exposed the deep-rooted prejudices in society. The trial of Captain Alfred Dreyfus, a Jewish officer accused of treason, ignited widespread public debate about the nature of anti-Semitism and the rights of Jews in European society. These injustices, alongside the growing tide of nationalist movements in Europe, sparked the rise of Zionism. The movement, led by figures like Theodor Herzl, called for the establishment of a Jewish homeland in Palestine, an idea that would later play a crucial role in the creation of modern Israel. Chapter 7: The Holocaust. The Holocaust stands as one of the darkest periods in human history, its brutality unparalleled in its scope and precision. It began in 1939, when Nazi Germany, under the leadership of Adolf Hitler, launched a campaign of terror and destruction against Jews, Roma, disabled individuals, and other minorities. The regime's twisted ideology of racial purity led to the creation of a systematic extermination plan that would devastate Jewish communities across Europe. As the war raged on, millions of Jews were forcibly relocated to ghettos, and countless others were sent to labor camps, where conditions were designed to break their spirit and enslave them. As the Nazis expanded their control, they implemented the final solution, a brutal policy to eradicate Jews entirely. The concentration and extermination camps, such as Auschwitz, Treblinka, and Sobibor, became sites of mass murder, where Jews, along with others deemed undesirable, were worked to death, starved, or murdered in gas chambers. It is believed that 6 million Jewish lives were lost during this horrific period, representing 2/3 of Europe's Jewish population. The methodical and industrial approach of the Nazis to mass murder shocked the world, leaving an indelible scar on the Jewish people and reshaping the global perception of human rights and morality. The end of the war in 1945 marked the liberation of many camps, but for the survivors, the trauma was far from over. The Holocaust left deep emotional and psychological scars, and the surviving Jewish communities faced the challenge of rebuilding their lives amid the ruins of Europe. The global response to the Holocaust, or lack thereof, fueled a sense of urgency within the Jewish people, hastening efforts toward the establishment of a Jewish state. This new momentum was crucial in the eventual creation of the modern state of Israel, which emerged in 1948, as Jews sought a homeland where they could be safe from further persecution. Chapter 8: The Birth of Israel. In 1948, after decades of struggle, both diplomatic and military, the modern state of Israel was officially declared. The dream of returning to the land of their ancestors, held by Jews for over 2 millennia, had finally been realized. In 1947, the United Nations had put forward a plan to partition Palestine into separate Jewish and Arab states. The Jewish community, despite facing intense opposition, accepted the proposal, hoping for peace. Unfortunately, it was rejected by the Arab states, who were unwilling to accept the presence of a Jewish state in what they considered Arab land. This led to a tense standoff that would soon erupt into war. On May 14, 1948, Israel proclaimed its independence, and almost immediately, the neighboring Arab countries launched a military invasion, determined to destroy the fledgling state. The armies of Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq descended upon Israel, leading to the First Arab-Israeli War. Despite being vastly outnumbered and under-equipped, the Israeli forces, with their resolve and determination, held their ground. Miraculously, Israel not only survived but was able to secure additional territories beyond the borders defined by the UN partition plan. This outcome marked a stunning military victory for the Jewish state and established Israel's right to exist on the world stage. The creation of Israel was a momentous achievement, one that fulfilled the centuries-old longing for a return to Zion, as prophesied in the Hebrew Scriptures. However, this triumph came at a heavy cost. The establishment of the Jewish state led to the displacement of over 700,000 Palestinians, who fled or were forced from their homes in the wake of the war. This displacement, along with the ensuing territorial disputes, set the stage for decades of conflict between Israelis and Palestinians. To this day, the ramifications of those events continue to influence the politics and relationships of the region, as both peoples continue to struggle with the legacies of war and displacement. Chapter 9. Modern Israel and the Jewish Diaspora. In the 21st century, Israel stands as a thriving beacon of democracy and innovation. From its early days as a state established in 1948, Israel has grown into a world leader in technology, agriculture, and medical advancements. Cities like Tel Aviv, with its sleek skyscrapers and bustling nightlife, and Jerusalem, with its sacred sites and rich history, symbolize the vibrant pulse of the nation. The desert landscapes surrounding these cities have transformed into fertile ground for innovation, where groundbreaking technologies are born, and the startup culture flourishes. Yet, the story of Israel is far from simple. Despite its remarkable achievements, the country faces significant challenges, particularly in its relationships with neighboring nations. Regional conflicts, stemming from historical grievances and territorial disputes, continue to shape Israel's foreign policy and internal dynamics. At the same time, the Israeli society grapples with deep divides between secular and religious communities, between Jewish immigrants from various backgrounds, and between the Jewish majority and the Arab minority within its borders. These tensions highlight the ongoing struggle to balance democracy with identity, peace with security, and tradition with modernity. The Jewish diaspora, spread across the globe, remains closely tied to the State of Israel, maintaining a deep emotional and spiritual connection to the land. Jews around the world continue to navigate questions of identity and assimilation, particularly in places like Europe and the Americas, where Jewish communities face the complexities of living in multicultural societies. The Jewish people's journey, from the ancient deserts of Mesopotamia to the dynamic streets of modern-day Israel, is a testament to an unwavering commitment to faith, culture, and community. Their resilience in the face of adversity, whether through exile, persecution, or the establishment of a homeland, remains an enduring symbol of hope and survival. The history of the Jewish people is not just a chronicle of past events but a living narrative that continues to unfold. It is a story of survival against all odds, of a people who, despite exile and persecution, never lost sight of their identity and hope. As we reflect on this journey, we are reminded of the profound connections between history, memory, and the human spirit. And that's it, thanks for watching. If you enjoy exploring historical worlds, be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on more exciting stories.